get here, and everybody else that wishes they were Thorsten. There's two things in my life. Oh, and I guess because I am the one that have been allowed to stay on the family farm. We can go 6 generations right now on that homestead, which is amazing, I think. The youngest is going to be 2 years old, and I've got high hopes for him. His mother told me one day that he would never be a farmer. So I looked at his little sister and I said, Signe, if he can't be a farmer, you'll have to marry a farmer. And his mother quite quickly said, she will not marry a farmer. We'll change her attitude. I guess we'll probably have to let our minds drift away back to many, many years ago in the 1800s. Why would anybody want to come over to Saskatchewan? I wasn't interested enough in learning about that history. So what I have to say today will be the truth as spoken by me. And probably 50% of that will be the real truth. But what did make Thorstein and Anna come to Saskatchewan? I suppose to seek out a better life. And there was lots of it here at the time. It wasn't settled. They came over here in 1892 with his mother, Gudberg. I'll pick up the story at a place called Thingvelda, and that was up by Churchbridge, Saskatchewan. And they were there for probably 4 years and moved along into the White Sands. And then in 1898, they squatted. Some of you won't know what squatting is, and that's not kneeling down or anything. That's when you came and you just found a parcel of land that you thought you might like for whatever reasons, and you built your lodging and whatever, you made your farm there. And that was along the Foam Lake Heritage Marsh. When they were at Thingvelda, they ran out of feed for their livestock, and 2 people, Christian Helgeson being one and an Inky being the other, took their saddle horses and rode ahead out west, and came upon a lake called Fishing Lake. And there was abundance of water there and abundance of hay, and being Icelanders, that's what they want because they were livestock people. And they reported back of this great find that up and squatted around the marsh, on the west side of the marsh. They had 3 children when they came over here. And the other 9 were born afterwards. In 1891, and they were all born in Iceland, and they came here with their parents. At the Foam Lake Marsh, there was a school across the lake, and I'm told that the kids were put on a little rowboat in the morning, and the boat was pushed, and the wind was blowing the right direction. They went to school. They didn't make it. And today we hope that our kids get to school when the bus drives right to the yard and picks them up. That's the difference. They farmed there for until 1903, when the government of the day was starting to let out homesteads. And a homestead was a parcel of land that you could apply for, and if you were able to get it, you had to prove up so many acres a year. You had to cultivate this land up, and you had to make yourself worthy of that quarter of land. Thorstein applied for the quarter 32-30-12. He was on the northwest border, and his mother, Gudberg, filed on the east quarter, where we live today. It's amazing to me, and I have all the papers with me of the application for the farm. She was 70 years old when she applied for the farm. Now, there are political people here that are in the high powers. What in the hell were they doing giving land to a 70-year-old lady? But they did. So she was able to get a quarter, and he got a quarter, so now they had a half section. Are some of the questions being answered?
Can we speed it up? look at how many you have now.
All of these records, I'm going to lay out on the table, and it shows the application for the farm. It shows Goodbeard's naturalization papers. It shows what they may have had to have when to apply to get the property. On this paper, Thorstein, it says, had 80 head of cattle, and he had 12 horses and quite a few sheep. 80 head of cattle is a lot of cattle today even, and that was a lot of cattle back in those days. That was a lot of manual work. To put that together in those few years was quite an achievement in itself. So obviously he was a hard worker, or she was a hard worker. So now we're at 1903. They move up to from the place where they squatted, which is down where they squatted is only a half a mile west of where my son Gary lives, where we have a cattle operation. Again, I wasn't all that keenly interested, but I can remember going with Dad from the original farm with the horses to a quarter we had in the marsh at the time where they put up hay. And loading the hay, the loose hay in the rack, and coming home and laying in that hay as a kid. I was probably 32. Maybe not quite. And laying in the hay, and Dad's trying to tell me these stories, and of course I wasn't really listening, but I do remember him saying, that's where my folks squatted, down there. And that's where I was born in 1899 of November. So he was the last one born on this, where they squatted. And this is still the Northwest Territories. We're not into Saskatchewan yet. That didn't happen until 1905. They farmed there till 1930. And in 1930, they, for whatever reason, I don't know, they decided to move to Leslie. And on the picture out in the other room, that fancy house is another house that he built. He built two real fancy houses, one on the original farm, which was, in my mind, a very, very beautiful home. Took a lot of money to obviously to build a place like that. And then in 1930 to go to Leslie and build another very, very fancy home was quite an achievement again. I understand that Dad and Uncle Joe and Uncle Dan Thorsteinson did do some work on the farm, but again, for what Uncle Joe eventually went out to work, and like I said, in 1930, Dad wasn't married then, but he went with his mother and Dad to the town of Leslie. And in 1943, Anna passed away in Gimli, and in 1946, Thorstein passed away in Home Lake. Thorstein spent, and I just learned this the other day, spent his last 2 weeks at the Bjornson home. That was a relation, very close relation, because Björn Bjornson was married to Christine Thorsteinson, who had a couple of children and became ill, and had taken her cell phone, I guess, at that time, and phoned back home and asked if Signe would come over and help raise the two kids, and eventually Björn married her. So the Thorsteinsons must have been pretty darn good if you wanted two of them. Well, we're getting into the families, but we don't have a lot of time. So we went through the first three, Yona, Fanny, and Sarah. Then Aunt Louise was born, and she was born in the White Sands, Northwest Territories, and she married Mike Magnuson. we want to go back, we'll go back to Yonina, or Yono married Charlie Clark. Fanny, John Ovingstone, which it was great to see all the Ovingstones because that was just a name to me before, and now I'm put some faces to it. And Sarah. Sarah married Elwood Armour. In the town of Home Lake, there's a street named Armour Drive, and Elwood had some property, some farmland, but he was a meat cutter by trade and spent many years with a store right in the town of Home Lake. And Louise lived right across from where we lived in Leslie. He's right across the back alley. We could just run over there, and again, our family was quite young, but we had many memories going over to that house and having the big dinners. Brian can attest to that. I never got much to eat in those days because Brian and Paul were ahead of me all the time. But I've made up for it since, I'll tell you. Then we go to Stoney, or Thorstein, and nicknamed Stoney, Thorsteinson. Thorstein was killed on Vimy Ridge, the only one that went to war. He was only 20 years old. 1917, he died. Yonina Gudrun was Nina, and she married Dan Thorsteinson. And that's where we get into one of the double marriages in the family. Dan took Aunt Nina, and Einar took his sister on trade. Beakers. Then we go to Einar, and like I said, Einar married Beaker Thorlickson. Bjarni, he died in infancy. Johan, who I'm very proud to be named after. In fact, I was named after Uncle Joe, was Johan, and Uncle Dan. So I got both names there. And Uncle Joe married Mamie Griffiths. Gwenny, or Gladdy, she was unmarried, lived in Winnipeg, and she's got quite a history. She was a tough one, but a very nice lady. You know, I remember Judy and I going into Winnipeg shortly after married and going to her place, and it wasn't the fanciest, but it was a place to live. Had the common bathroom, where all 75 people used it, I think, and eventually, and just a little wee room, and Judy had to go to use the bathroom, and while she was away, Gladdy said to me, I think we should have a wee one. And she just reached over and pulled the cupboard over, and out comes a little Mickey, and we did ourselves a good justice to that. Bore her cigarette with the ashes out about that long. But that was Aunt Gladdy, and that was great. She had a good heart, and I think Arnie will attest to that. She just helped everybody out. She was always there for anybody that needed it. Bjarnina, that was Aunt Ina, who married John Bjarnason. Uncle John and Aunt Ina and Dad and my mother moved back to the farm in 1950 and farmed together there for a while. And then Uncle John retired from the farm, and things progressed from there.
How old were you when you took over, Danny?
About 16. Not that, well, back then it seemed young, but there was, Dad told me they were out stooking when they were 8, so I was getting old. Anna Augusta, or Joey, and there was a young lady here last night, I can't see her right now, but she said her name was Joey, and it was passed down. Where is she?
I don't think Joey's here. That's Mum's granddaughter.
Right, yeah.
She's not here right now.
She was here this morning for breakfast, but anyway, that was very interesting to hear, and she was quite interested in the history, and we had a good talk last night. And she married Nate Thompson. Nathan Thompson. Okay, now I'm missing some stuff. Might have Remember what I told you when you left home? You just do as you're told, don't ask any questions.